Live from London, this is BBC News. A new dawn for Syria. The nation wakes up to its first full day in the post-Assad regime era. This is the scene live in the capital Damascus right now. Syria's opposition raises its flag at the embassy in Moscow. Russia has given Bashar al-Assad and his family political asylum, and they are believed to be in the city. Syria celebrates the downfall of a family dynasty that ruled for more than half a century.
A historic moment in every sense of the word. Ahmad al-Shara' Abu Muhammad al-Julani here for the first time in the Great Umayyad Mosque.
In other news, the rapper Jay-Z is accused of raping a 13-year-old girl. He's named with Sean Diddy Combs in a civil lawsuit. Both deny the claim. Hello, I'm Nicky Schiller. Welcome to the programme. We start with those monumental events in Syria. The rebel coalition that toppled the brutal regime of President Bashar al-Assad and his father, a dynasty that had controlled the country for more than 50 years, says it's working to form a transitional government. Islamist fighters took the capital Damascus yesterday after sweeping through the country in less than a fortnight. People poured into the main square, chanting freedom after the rebels seized control. Well, let me take you now to the scene live in Damascus, where it has just gone midday. As you can see, people are once again out on the streets, digesting that news that the Assad regime is no more. Now, Syrian civil defence workers have also deployed to the ousted Assad regime's notorious Sudnaya prison to investigate reports that people are still trapped in cells that are hidden underground. Now, the United Nations Security Council is to hold an emergency meeting later today to discuss the fall of the regime. Now, I want to show you pictures live from the border between Syria and Lebanon. There, as you can see, there have been long lines of cars and other vehicles trying to move from Lebanon into Syria because, of course, many thousands of Syrians who fled during President Assad's rule have been returning from both Lebanon and neighbouring Jordan. Nearly 1.5 million of Lebanon's 5 million population are Syrian refugees. And in Russia, we have seen this moment, the Syrian opposition flag raised on the Syrian embassy there. Now, according to Russian state media, the deposed Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, and his family have been granted asylum in Russia. Russia, of course, a key ally of the former president. Now, the United States has led international reaction to the fall of the Assad government, with President Biden describing it as a fundamental act of justice after decades of repression, but also a moment of risk and uncertainty. Now, we'll have the latest from Syria shortly. But first, this report from our Middle East correspondent, Hugo Bachega.
Tears of happiness. Gunshots to celebrate the moment many in Syria waited for decades to see. They are free of the Assad regime, and their country is at a turning point. It was an astonishing campaign by rebels. They advanced quickly. Last week, they took Aleppo, on the weekend, Homs, and in a matter of hours, they were in Damascus. In some places, they faced no resistance. The army was unable and apparently unwilling to stop them. This is the end of a brutal regime that didn't tolerate dissent. The Assads crushed any kind of opposition. They killed, arrested, and tortured their critics. When the rebels arrived in the capital, they went straight to a well-known prison to set the inmates free. This is their leader, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, head of the Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. He took a victory tour of Damascus, visiting the historic Umayyad Mosque. My colleague Feraz Kilani was there for BBC Arabic.
A historic moment in every sense of the word. Ahmad al-Shara' Abu Muhammad al-Julani here for the first time in the Great Umayyad Mosque.
The rebel commander has been playing down past links to Al-Qaeda, saying he wants to build a Syria for all its people. The president fled as the rebels closed in. A statue of his father was pulled down, and his residence in Damascus was stripped bare by looters. People carried what they could without anyone to stop them. For Assad himself, Russian state media says he and his family are now in Moscow and that they will be granted asylum on humanitarian grounds. His fall is a major setback for his allies, Russia and Iran, but has been welcomed in the West.
We will engage with all Syrian groups, including within the process led by the United Nations, to establish a transition away from the Assad regime. We've taken note of statements by the leaders of these rebel groups in recent days, and they're saying the right things now. But as they take on greater responsibility, we will assess not just their words, but their actions.
Syrians are hoping for peace, but they fear chaos and even more violence. This is a fractured country. Different groups with different goals control different areas. Many are celebrating now, but the road ahead is far from clear. Hugo Bashega, BBC News, on the Turkish-Syrian border.
Well, as we heard Hugo mention, Assad is now reported to be in Russia, where he's been granted asylum. Russia has also requested an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council to discuss what's been happening in Syria. Well, let's go live to our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg, who is in Moscow. Steve, I wondered if you could just first of all outline what's been the reaction in Russia to what has happened in Syria.
It's very difficult for Russia to sugarcoat what has happened. I mean, objectively, this is a blow to Russia, to Russia's prestige, when you consider the resources, the huge amount of resources that Russia poured into trying to make sure that Bashar al-Assad stayed in power the last 9 years, sort of financial resources, political resources, and of course, military resources. Russia intervening in the Syrian war in 2015 to shore up Assad, sending thousands of troops, Russian air power. And keep in mind that this intervention by Russia was driven by Russia's desire to project itself as a global power and to establish itself as the key power in the Middle East, a power that could speak to all sides. And what have we seen in recent days? We've seen this project Syria unraveling for the Kremlin in quite dramatic circumstances. So, you know, it is a blow, and that is reflected by some of the headlines in today's Russian papers. So one paper, Kommersant, said that Russia has lost its key ally in the Middle East. Another paper said that the failure of Assad's foreign allies to save him is a blow to their reputation. Well, that's a reference to Russia as well as to Iran. But I think what we're seeing happening now is, just from reading the Russian papers this morning, a number of messages, a number of talking points are being emphasized. I think an attempt by the authorities to try to minimize the embarrassment. So one of the messages that you pick up a lot on in today's Russian papers is that, you know, this isn't Moscow's fault. This is the fault of the Assad regime, the Syrian authorities, and the Syrian army that didn't fight hard enough to keep power. The second message, which is being pressed through the state media here, is that without Moscow's man in control, the situation in Syria could become more chaotic. And the third key message you pick up on is Russians are being told the war in Ukraine is much more of a priority now for Russia than the war in Syria. In other words, these dramatic events in Syria don't matter that much. And I think the hope is, on the part of the authorities, by pressing these messages, that the Russian public won't start to question what's been happening in Syria the last 9 years.
We've seen the Syrian opposition flag being raised on the Syrian embassy in Moscow. Do we have any idea where Assad and his family are at the moment?
Not at the moment. All we have to go on, as of now, is this statement that was read out on Russian state television last night and put out by a couple of Russian state news agencies, quoting a Kremlin source as saying that Assad and his family had arrived in Moscow had been granted asylum on humanitarian grounds. Where exactly they are, we don't know. What their plans are, we don't know. There's due to be the daily conference call given by President Putin's spokesman this morning, so perhaps we'll find out more details then.
And of course, it is worth bearing in mind that Russia has military bases in Syria, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a key concern now for the Russians. There are two main bases the Russians have. One is an air base, Khmeimim, and the other is a naval base, Tartus. And it's these bases which really gave Russia its foothold in the eastern Mediterranean. These were Russia's prize, if you like, from Bashar al-Assad for Russia's military assistance and keeping him in power. And they are a key staging point. Key staging post, a key hub for Russia, sending in military contractors, for example, to Africa, sending in supplies to Africa as well. So if Russia loses those, that will be a blow. It's not clear at the moment what the fate of those bases will be. But we do know, again, from that statement that was read out on Russian state television yesterday, that Russian officials have made contact with the armed Syrian opposition. That was the phrase used. The question of the bases was mentioned in that statement. So I think it's likely that already conversations are going on about what is going to happen to those two key Russian bases.
Steve Rosenberg, live in Moscow. Thank you very much. And you can read more from Steve on the BBC News website and app. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News. Let's return now to the Syrian capital, Damascus. I want to show you the live pictures from Damascus, where it is coming up to 15:15 midday, and you can see people are back on the streets trying to digest the news that the Assad regime is no more. We've heard beeping of car horns, and people are taking selfies there, you can see, and sending those to people outside the country. Of course, there are a large number of Syrians who fled from Damascus and elsewhere in the country because of the Assad regime. Our Middle East correspondent Lina Sinjab, who herself is Syrian, had to leave 11 years ago, but continued to report on Syria and the region from Beirut. But she's now been back for just over 24 hours, and she joins us live. Lina, I wondered if you could give us a sense of the mood in the country 24 hours after the fall of the Assad regime.
Well, I think, we've seen and witnessed the surge of joy and happiness among many Syrians yesterday. We've seen it for ourselves here in the main square of Umayyad Square. We've spoken to people, but also if we watch the news, across the country, outside the country, it's a really unprecedented moment for Syrians. That's something that they've been dreaming of for years, but it took them 13 years to achieve. And it's like really something something unbelievable for them that, after 54 years of the Assad dynasty, there is no more Assad in power. There is hope for a better future, despite, concerns over how if the Islamist rebels are going to lead and if there will be, immediately stability and safety. But people are still seizing the moment to enjoy this really great victory as they see it.
And Lina, we've seen yesterday people being released from the prisons who had been held for a very long time under the Assad regime. But there are reports today that there are people still in the underground cells. What do we know about that?
Well, imprisonment, torture of people inside prison, even to death, has been one of Assad's tactics, Assad, the father and the son. And there are plenty of prisons across the country and here in Damascus, many of whom, even detention centers, have many layers underground. But the most notorious one is Saydnaya, which is at the outside the city to the south, and it lies on a top, on a hilltop. And many people know that for fact that there are many hidden prisons there, many prisons built underground for layers and layers. People broke into prisons yesterday with the rebels. Thousands of families are there and still there waiting to find their beloved ones. Human rights activists say more than 100,000 Syrians have been forcibly disappeared since the uprising began in 2011. So the search is still ongoing. The rescue group White Helmet is joining force in professional search for the prisoners inside Naya. They have maps of the prison based on witnesses from former prisoners, and the search is still ongoing.
And Lina, the big question now is what happens next? The rebel group that has seized power, saying it's going to work to transfer power to a transitional government. Do we have any idea how that would work?
Well, so far what we've seen was really incredible in the smooth handover of power. For years, many people thought that, toppling Assad regime will bring a bloody battle to Damascus, and it will be really a messy turnover. But what we've seen was a smooth and peaceful handover of power. Of course, Bashar al-Assad fleeing the country. The prime minister came out to say that he's going to be caretaker until a new government is in power, and that public institutions should be protected. Government employees should remain until a new government is formed. And that was backed by the leader of the opposition, Ahmed al-Shara or al-Julani, who also said that it's important to work with the current government until a new government is formed and to protect public institutions. He also came out yesterday after a surprise appearance in the Umayyad Mosque, addressing people, saying that this is going to be a turn into a new Syria, a Syria that will be inclusive of all denominations of the Syrian society. But words are different than deeds, so everyone is watching to see how the rebels are going to deliver on their promises, especially that the rebels are different groups in different areas. The ones in the south are different than the ones in the north. It seems that there is big deal of coordination between all forces, including a former government. But there is a big challenge coming ahead: how to maintain security, how to maintain stability, how to enforce the rule of law, and what kind of a constitution is going to happen. The civil society has been really active over the past 10 years to ensure that there will be a Syria that includes everyone, following the topple of the regime. And these are the days to test that these hopes will be implemented, in a safe way.
We have seen at the border between Syria and Lebanon huge queues of cars and vehicles, because there is that additional issue of the return of the refugees, and there are a lot of them who fled the regime.
Yes, indeed. I mean, we've seen it yesterday as we were crossing the border. Hundreds of cars were lining up waiting to cross, and, they've managed to come in. And we're hearing reports and seeing images that other border crossing, even with Turkey, people are trying to go back to Syria. I think, hundreds of thousands of Syrians or millions have been forced to leave for safety because of the bombing, because of the arrest. Many are displaced in really terrible conditions on the borders, whether in Lebanon or Turkey, and they want to come back now that there is safety for them. They won't be arrested or killed. They're coming to celebrate a free Syria. However, there is the big question about the economy, how they're going to operate, what they're going to do in the future. But I think since the biggest fear of the Assad regime is gone, many are going to come back and explore and try to be back in their own homes and towns.
And on a practical level, today, are things like schools open? Are shops open? Is the government running as far as you can see?
There is like a soft return back to life today. Streets are started to be busy with people. Some shops have opened, bakeries are operating, food supermarkets are operating. Of course, big businesses or public institutions are still holding until, to see how the situation will be assessed. Schools and universities are not opening yet. But, if you go out and about in the streets, you feel that, life is going back to normal. We hardly heard any, a gunfire today, at least from where we are, so it seems that it's relatively quiet, and the chaotic scene of yesterday has changed today.
And Lina, I wondered if I could ask you on a personal note how you feel today, because you know Damascus really well, but you had to, as I mentioned at the beginning, flee the regime and report from Beirut. So now you're back there. What are your personal feelings?
Well, it's really incredible moment for me as a Syrian. I mean, at the end, this is my country. And for 10 years or 11 years since I left, I never felt I belonged anywhere else. And I had lost hopes that I would go back home and live normally in my own life. And of course, this is like a great moment for me to come feeling belonging again, being surrounded with my own people, see the joy among my own people, and feel that there is a different future for my own country. Yet I still have the questions. I'm taken by the emotional, joy of no fear. First time coming into the borders without fear. First time being on air without monitoring what I'm saying, fearing prosecution. But at the same time, I'm wondering when it will be stable enough, when it will be running enough, when I will be back and come back and live here permanently. These are questions I don't have answers for now, but I'll be watching so closely. And I can't wait for the moment to go back and live here permanently.
Lina Simjab, thank you very much for the latest there live from Damascus. Well, the rapidly developing events in Syria mark a major turning point in the Middle East and are being closely watched because of concerns about further regional instability. Lebanon said it was closing all its land border crossings with Syria except one. Jordan closed a border crossing with Syria, and Israel has issued warnings to villages in southern Syria as its forces seized a buffer zone in the Golan Heights. Let's go live to Jerusalem and speak to Yolande Knell, our Middle East correspondent. So Yolande, Israel quick to react to events in Syria.
Indeed, it was quick to react by sending its forces from the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights into a Syrian buffer zone. This was set up some 50 years ago under the terms of a ceasefire deal between Israel and Syria. Now, Israeli reports say that soldiers have now seized abandoned positions that have belonged to the Syrian army in this strategically important mountainous plateau. We've seen pictures of Israeli forces inside this buffer zone. Israel says it's acting there for defensive reasons. The Arab League has condemned Israel, saying that it is taking advantage of the downfall of President Assad to illegally control these areas. But we've had the Israeli foreign minister reiterating that Israel sees this as being something that is limited and temporary this morning. Now, earlier, the Israeli military was telling me that it refrains from commenting on the reports we've had in the past day that there have been dozens of Israeli strikes in southern Syria, but also in Damascus. We've now appear to have had the foreign minister addressing that as well. Israeli media reporting that he's confirmed that suspected chemical weapon sites and long-range rocket sites have been hit, basically saying that this was meant to prevent them from falling into the hands of what could be hostile actors, and saying that Israel was only acting in its own national security interests. It's worth pointing out as well that Israel is claiming some credit for the demise of President Assad, basically pointing out that in recent times it has dealt heavy blows to Iran and to its Lebanese proxy Hezbollah, which have really been propping him up in power.
Yolan Nell, live in Jerusalem. Thank you very much for the latest reaction there from Israel. Let us take you back to the live pictures again from Damascus, the Syrian capital, where people are out on the streets again, digesting that news that the Assad regime is no more. You can see them milling around. We were hearing from Lena that yesterday she heard lots of gunfire. Today there hasn't been that gunfire, but you can see where people are putting their cameras up and taking pictures of this moment to register it both there, but also, as we mentioned, there are lots of people who fled Syria, so they may well be sending those pictures to their relations outside the country. We will have a lot more live from across the region, so stay with us here on BBC News.